How's it going, everybody? Welcome to the Podcast Island, episode number 6. I am your host, Trinity Collins. This podcast can only be viewed on YouTube. Selected clips will be posted on the One Man Island Productions Instagram account. I'd like to thank you for listening to this podcast, and I hope you guys enjoy the show. So, today's topic is Dan Snyder. And before I get into Dan Snyder, I just want to say one thing. I remember first watching the National Football League. I think it was during the 2006 NFL season. And there are 3 games that popped into my head when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to talk about. And that was the Patriots and Chargers divisional round of the playoffs. Then it was the Patriots and Colts conference championship game. And then it was the Colts and Bears Super Bowl 41 in Miami. Those are the 3 games I remember from that season. And it got me hooked. And as the days and months went on, I had a thirst for more football. So I asked my parents, because I went on the NFL website and I found some DVDs, like documentaries of certain players or certain teams. And I asked my parents if they can give me the road to the Super Bowl featuring the Washington Redskins. That's what they were called at the time, before they were called the Commanders. The 1982, 87, 91 teams that made it to the Super Bowl and won. And as I was thinking about this, I realized something. From 1982 to 1991, over the course of 9 years, which would be 10 NFL seasons, Washington was in 4 Super Bowls and won 3. With 3 different quarterbacks, 1 great head coach, 1 great general manager that was held together by a great culture. There was a time where Washington was one of the most respected, feared, and dominating teams on both sides of the ball for the NFL for a decade, and maybe even longer than that. And think about this now. Since 1991, Washington has never reached the conference championship game, let alone the Super Bowl. And there's a glaring, obvious reason as to why that is. So just bear with me here because I'm going to bring out some numbers here. So starting in 1969, Jack Kent Cooke, and then in 1984, during that span from 69 to 98, Edward Bennett Williams also joined the fray in 1984. So for about 29 years, Washington played 450 total NFL games. I'm only counting regular season. They won 264 games, winning 264 games. That is a 58.4 win percentage. Now, on the surface, I mean, you're probably saying, like, that's pretty good. And quite frankly, over the course of 3 decades, that's really good to have a 58% win percentage. It isn't like, over a decade you have a 60% or 65% win percentage. This is over 30 years. You're bound to have some low points. But now here's where things get a little glaring. From 1999 all the way up to this past season, 2022 season, that's 23 years, 24 seasons. Washington has played 386 games, winning 164. That's a win percentage of 42.4. On top of that, they have terrible field conditions. That's bad. And it's all because of Dan Snyder. You guys realize over the last 24 seasons, Dan Snyder hasn't brought upon himself a lot of controversies. First thing is charging fans to go to training camp practice, not changing the Redskins' name, signing old and outdated players to big contracts. I'm pretty sure at one point over the last 3 years, it was reported that over 40 women who were former employees of the organization, including office workers and cheerleaders, have been sexually harassed discriminated against by Snyder and other male executives, colleagues, and players of the team since 2006. And not to mention, one of the reasons why other NFL owners and also the NFL are looking to push Dan Snyder out of the NFL and force him to sell the team was because about as recently as maybe a year ago, maybe a few months ago, Snyder, it was reported that intentionally underreported ticket sales to the NFL and the IRS in order to pay a smaller share into the NFL's visiting team fund, allowing him to keep more of the ticket revenue than he otherwise would have. There's several controversies with this guy, which bleeds into the franchise, which in turn creates a bad culture, which creates bad teams. I mean, this team has not gotten past the divisional round since the 1991 team that won the Super Bowl. They've gone through several head coaches. They've gone through several different quarterbacks. Not only that, the stadium is just old and outdated, and just there's no life within that team. There was even one instance where the training camp where the fans can come in and watch a team practice. There was like maybe 30 people there. Usually with teams like the Packers, the Patriots, the Chiefs, now that they have Patrick Mahomes, the Bills, those diehard teams, I mean, there's like over 100 people there. 300, 500. I mean, people pack those, those small fields, small stadiums, small bleachers just to watch their team practice. And look, let's look at it from the macro perspective. It's hard for teams to replace all-time great players. The Broncos haven't found a great franchise quarterback since John Elway. The Lions never had a Hall of Fame running back like Barry Sanders since Barry Sanders. And if you want to go into front office, the Bills haven't had a general manager like Brandon Beane since Bill Polian. And that was a long time ago. I'm talking about like the 90s Bills. And you're wondering, why do I bring this up? Dan Snyder has agreed to sell the Washington Commanders to a group led by the Philadelphia 76ers co-owner Joe Harris for $6 billion. The 76ers are in the playoffs right now and have been a well-run team over the last few years. And they're in good position to win the NBA Finals this year. On the surface, that's probably a good thing. But that's basketball, and again, that's the surface. This is football. This is totally different. Different sport, different culture, different way you have to attack this. And I know owners don't always make decisions as far as who gets cut, who gets signed, all that stuff. That's usually general manager, head coach's job when it comes to plays and actions on the field. But then again, owners do matter. I've been watching football since 2006. And there's three types of owners that I've noticed. Again, I'm a fan saying this. I'm not saying I'm an expert. There are those that are constantly getting involved in football matters, like the late great Al Davis, Jerry Jones, and Dan Snyder. Those are the guys who always are on football matters instead of doing what they're doing, just owning a team. If you want a guy that to, ingratiate and stick his nose into football matters, go look at scouts or general manager. That's their jobs. Then there are the ones that are very traditional, the teams that are family owned, like the Giants and the Bengals. Then you have the ones that stay out of football issues like Chiefs, Ravens, and Broncos. Joe Harris, if he really wants us to make this work, he has to establish a new culture, hire smart NFL people, and only get involved in football matters if it's a struggling franchise or if they need to make a big swing. Example 1. Do you think people there was a ESPN 30 for 30 about the Buffalo Bills, the 4 falls of Buffalo, and they talked about how this team went from a place that nobody wanted to play in because of Buffalo, low market, middle of nowhere, into a place that everybody wanted to go to. And that was because of the way the team was built, the culture it's set, I mean, think about it. Von Miller. Do you think a guy like Von Miller always wanted to go to Buffalo? I mean, if he had it his way, he probably would have gone to the Chargers or the 49ers or the Dolphins, where it's warm weather and it's just a better place, living environment. But he went to Buffalo because good team, good franchise. In my opinion, again, I'm a fan saying this. NFL owners, I think, like the status of owning an NFL team more than they actually like winning Super Bowls. I don't think they like it as much as head coaches and players. Because look, owners are businessmen. If the team goes 11-6 or 10-7 and makes the playoffs and wins a playoff game here and there, that's good business. Ticket revenues will be up. The money they make from the playoff game and TV rights and advertising deals, it's a lot of money. And it's good business. But then again, not everybody feels the same. Sometimes they just want to win, or at very least get to a Super Bowl. Ask the Lions, Texans, Browns. And I'm forgetting one. I don't know why I'm forgetting one. And look, it's amazing how a team at one point in their existence, like Washington, was regarded as a cornerstone franchise, and now they're relegated and viewed on par with the Lions, Texans, and Browns. And again, as I said before, there are three types of owners, and they all have positives and negatives. The family-owned business, the Giants, the Mara family, the Steelers, the Rooney family, and the Chiefs, the Hunt family. There's positives and negatives. The positives is they're very loyal to the town, state, and region, the traditions of the team and the game, and the city. The negatives is they stay on that tradition and loyalty for too long and they can't adapt. Example one is that they signed Daniel Jones to a 4-year, $160 million contract. Now, the good thing is that they have their franchise quarterback, but the negative is he only had one good season, and the reason why they like him so much is because they remind him of Eli Manning. Now, Eli Manning won 2 Super Bowls, but he only made the playoffs 5 or 6 times out of a 16-year career. Look, you can't rely on that all the time to win a Super Bowl every now and then. You have to find a quarterback that could put you in position year in, year out, like a Mahomes, Burrow, or Allen. And look at the Steelers. The Steelers rely on defense and running the football all the time. And look, that's tradition. I like the fact that they do that. But the negative is, when you rely on the run game so much, you have to eventually throw the ball to get yourself back into the game. The Chiefs trust Mahomes to throw the ball 60 times a game. I mean, that's just their makeup. Yeah, it's nice to run the ball. And look, the Chiefs ran the ball more in the game against the Eagles. But then again, it wasn't always like that in every game. They only did it in that one game. And then you have owners like the Bills, Tim and Kim Pegula. And they're the kind of owners that they're willing to move a franchise because of business-related issues. And they're the kind of ones that kind of in a way, flaunt their money, but not willing to pay a majority of the shares to pay for a new stadium. They always try to force the city or the residents to pay for a stadium, even though sometimes they wouldn't want to raise the taxes because of everybody else, all the other issues. So oftentimes they force their hand, they move the team. Could you imagine the Bills be called the Texas Bills or the Austin Bills? Doesn't even sound right. I mean, hell, saying Las Vegas Raiders doesn't sound great to me. Oakland Raiders sound great, but then again, that's just how owners are. They're businessmen. That's how they look at things. That's the reason why David Tepper changed the field conditions to turf instead of grass, because he wanted more bowl games, wanted more sporting events. Turf lasts longer. And then you have the Mike Brown, who's very cheap. But businessmen, again, two different sides of the coin. Either cheap or they look to different ways to make money. And then you have the Packers, owned by the fans. And the operations are run by Mark Murphy and Brad Gutekunst. And I've seen on social media where Packers fans like the fact that there's no owner because they didn't want a rich billionaire ruling their the franchise. And I'm sitting here like, listen, yeah, you don't have an owner that could possibly move your team to a better location. You don't have an owner that does this, that, or the third thing. But the bad thing is that an owner, depending on the one you get, may want to force the GM's hand and the president's hand to go get certain players. One of the criticisms I have with the Packers, I've always said this, that they're a farming system. All they do is draft and develop. And yes, that's a good thing. But sometimes you just need to draft an established veteran that's ready to go right now. Sometimes when you have a star quarterback like Aaron Rodgers was with the Packers until that Jets deal is made, I mean, when you have a guy in this prime, you shouldn't be relying on 22, 23-year-olds that are still developing to make plays for you. Sometimes you gotta spend a pretty penny to get the job done. You could have signed a lot of different guys during that time, like Odell Beckham Jr. when he was available. Or you could have signed a receiver in the first round. You could have done a lot of things aggressively, but they're not. And that's just what they are. They're conservative, and they're not willing to take big swings. So, as I end this podcast, allow me to make something clear. The reason why I bring all this up is because the culture of the team and how they do business, it trickles down from the owner. The owner, in a way, establishes the culture, and it trickles down to the rest of the organization. All right? If the owner is cheap, like Mike Brown, then you're going to struggle. If your owner is hyper-aggressive, it makes bad judgments, then you're going to struggle. If your owner is smart, willing to stay out of football decisions, trust everybody, makes timely and at the very least very good transactional moves in free agency and in drafts, that can win you a Super Bowl, and it does it the right way. I mean, look, the Patriots, the Chiefs, the Steelers, and the Eagles do things the right way. Sometimes, again, I know I mentioned the Steelers, they tend to be too traditional, but then again, you don't go like 15 years, I think it is, without a losing season. That doesn't happen by accident. There's something to that. So, I guess I'm going to end this podcast by asking this question, or rhetorical question. Will Joe Harris be a good or very good NFL owner, or will he flop on his face? I don't know. But here's what I want. I want better field conditions. That means I want better grass. I want a better stadium. Find a way to get the team back in D.C. I mean, I doubt it's going to happen. I mean, the old RFK Stadium is still there, and the parking lot, I guess, where it used to have parking for people, for the residents who want to play there, go watch the game, and even visiting team buses, it's all fields now. That's what it is. You need to have a great GM, great head coach. You need a 5-year plan, and you need to figure out how to establish a culture that revives this franchise. This franchise is dead. It went 8-1, and it just felt like nothing to me. I'm not even a Washington fan. I'm not even a Ravens fan. I'm just a fan of football. I mean, get good draft picks. Sign good quality free agents. Don't go for the splash ones. Just get the ones that fit the franchise and fit the team that you want. And get a great franchise quarterback. You don't need I don't think you need a Patrick Mahomes. I mean, it's hard to find one of those. Just find an efficient quarterback that's really good under pressure. I think that's what they need to do. Is it going to be easy? It's going to take some time. But you got to be willing to do the work. And that is important. I would like to thank everybody for listening to this podcast Island episode number 6. This podcast on Dan Snyder. I'm your host, Trinity Collins. This podcast can only be viewed on YouTube. Selected clips will be posted on the One Man Island Productions Instagram account. Thank you for listening, and I hope you guys enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll see you guys in the future.